What if the darkest night of your life is not the end of your story, but the doorway to your true beginning? What if the very thing that broke you is the very thing that will reveal why you were placed on this earth in the first place? Have you ever wondered why the Bible feels so alive, so personal, as if its stories are somehow connected to your own? There are hidden connections woven through its pages, patterns of loss and redemption, of death and resurrection, of crushing and calling. And maybe, just maybe, your life is following that same pattern right now. You think you're alone in your pain. You think no one sees the tears you cry when the lights are off and the world is quiet. You think your failure disqualified you. But what if your breaking is not a disqualification? What if it's preparation? Sometimes God does not lead us into our calling with applause and open doors. Sometimes He leads us there through silence, through loss, through seasons that feel like everything is falling apart, because a full vessel cannot receive new oil. And maybe that's what this season is doing to you. Emptying you, stripping away the noise, removing the things you thought you needed so that He can give you what you were actually created for. You've felt the sting of rejection. You've watched relationships collapse. You've seen dreams slip through your fingers like sand. And each time, it felt like the end. But what if it wasn't the end? What if it was the ground breaking open so something deeper could grow? Jesus once said that unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much fruit. That's not just poetry. That's a spiritual law. Death is not always destruction. Sometimes death is multiplication in disguise. Right now, you might feel buried, covered in darkness, pressed down by disappointment. But seeds are buried before they bloom. And the pressure you feel is not there to crush you. It's there to root you. Roots grow in hidden places. Strength is built in unseen seasons. What feels like abandonment may actually be development. Think about Joseph, betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, forgotten in prison. If anyone had a reason to believe his life was wasted, it was him. But the pit led to the palace. The prison led to promotion. The betrayal positioned him to save nations. His greatest heartbreak became the pathway to his highest calling. What if your story is unfolding the same way? What if the very thing that humiliated you is the thing that will one day elevate you? David was overlooked by his own father, left in the fields, while others were considered more qualified. No spotlight, no applause, just sheep and solitude. But it was in that hidden place that he learned to fight lions and bears. It was in isolation that he learned to worship. The field prepared him for the throne. And maybe your field, the season where no one notices you, no one celebrates you, is not punishment. Maybe it's preparation. Maybe God is developing something in you that cannot be formed in the spotlight. When Jesus hung on the cross, it looked like absolute defeat. The sky darkened. Hope seemed buried. His followers scattered in fear. To the world, it was over. But heaven was not panicking. Heaven was writing redemption into what looked like ruin. The cross was not the end of the story. It was the turning point. Resurrection was already on its way. And if you are in a Friday season right now, where everything feels lost and silent, don't forget that Sunday is coming. Resurrection always follows crucifixion. Glory follows suffering. New life follows surrender. You might feel like you're hanging on your own cross, your reputation shattered, your confidence broken, your plans nailed down and exposed. But the same power that raised Jesus from the grave is not distant from your story. The grave did not have the final word. and neither does your failure. Neither does your heartbreak. Neither does your depression. The story is not finished just because it hurts. Maybe what broke you was the loss of a relationship you thought would last forever. Maybe it was a job that ended without warning. Maybe it was a dream you invested years into, only to watch it collapse overnight. When dreams die, it feels like part of you dies with them. But your identity was never meant to be built on outcomes. It was never meant to rest on applause or achievement. When Jesus encountered the woman who was about to be stoned for her past, he did not define her by her failure. He did not shame her into silence. He lifted her into dignity. He saw beyond her mistake. And maybe that's what he sees in you right now. Not your worst moment, not your weakest decision, but your potential, your calling, your becoming. Peter stepped out of a boat and walked on water. For a moment, he did the impossible, but when he looked at the waves instead of Jesus, fear pulled him under. And as he began to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." That cry was not polished. It was desperate, honest, and immediately, Jesus reached out his hand. Maybe you're sinking right now. Maybe the waves of anxiety, uncertainty, and doubt are louder than your faith. But the moment you cry out, you are not abandoned. Weakness is not the absence of calling. Sometimes it is the doorway to deeper dependence. There is a garden in every calling, a place like Gethsemane, where surrender feels heavier than ever. Jesus himself prayed, "If it is possible, let this cup pass from me." That was not weakness. That was humanity. But he finished the prayer with surrender. "Not my will, but yours be done." And through that surrender, salvation was born. Your Gethsemane may look like unanswered prayers. It may look like waiting. It may look like doors that refuse to open. But surrender is not losing. It is trusting that God sees what you cannot. Closed doors can feel cruel. Rejection can feel personal. But sometimes what feels like rejection is redirection. Sometimes God closes a door not to punish you, but to protect you, not to limit you, but to align you. The relationship that ended may have saved you from a future that would have broken you even more deeply. The opportunity you lost may have kept you from settling for less than your true assignment. Jesus said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." That invitation was not for the strong. It was not for the put together. It was for the exhausted, the overwhelmed, the broken. If you feel tired in your soul, you are exactly the kind of person he calls. Your exhaustion is not proof that you failed. It may be proof that you've been carrying something you were never meant to carry alone. Look through Scripture, and you will not find perfect people being called. Moses stuttered. Gideon doubted. Jeremiah felt too young. Paul carried a past he could not erase. And yet, God used them. Not because they were flawless, but because they were willing. Calling is not built on your perfection. It is built on your surrender. And brokenness has a way of softening your heart so you can finally say yes without pride. Why was Jesus born in a manger instead of a palace? Because God often chooses humble places to release his greatest glory. He enters the places that feel small, forgotten, unimpressive. If your heart feels like a stable, messy, chaotic, unworthy, that may be exactly where hope wants to be born. Emptiness makes room for something holy. You may feel misunderstood, misjudged, overlooked. Jesus knows that feeling. He was accused, mocked, abandoned. Crowds once shouted praise and later shouted for his crucifixion. If you've been betrayed or misrepresented, you are not walking a foreign path. You are walking a familiar one, and truth has a way of rising even when it is buried for a time. When Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days, it seemed beyond repair. The smell of death had already set in. But Jesus stood before that grave and said, "I am the resurrection and the life." Then he called Lazarus out, and what was dead walked out alive. There are things in your life that feel sealed in a tomb: dreams, confidence, joy. But resurrection power does not expire. What looks final to you is not final to God. Gold is refined in fire, not destroyed by it. The heat reveals its purity. If you are in a fire right now, it may not be because you are disposable. It may be because you are valuable. Shallow pain does not prepare you for deep purpose, and deep purpose requires deep transformation. One day you will look back on this season and realize it was not random. The tears were not wasted. The nights were not meaningless. The delays were not punishment. They were shaping you, strengthening you, aligning you. The place where you fell may become the place where you find your voice. The story that embarrassed you may become the testimony that frees someone else. Imagine standing in the future, looking back at the moment that almost broke you, and instead of bitterness, you feel gratitude. Because if that heartbreak had not happened, you would have stayed small. If that door had not closed, you would have settled. If that dream had not died, you would never have discovered the greater one waiting beneath it. Your greatest breaking may be your truest calling, because broken things let the light in. Cracks allow compassion to flow. Pain deepens empathy, and empathy is powerful. God does not waste pain. He weaves it. He turns ashes into beauty, mourning into dancing, loss into legacy. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not disqualified. You are in process. And process can feel like loss before it feels like gain. But the author of your story has not put down his pen. The final chapter has not been written yet. So don't give up in the middle of the story. Don't assume that because it hurts, it's over. The same God who turned a cross into a symbol of hope can turn your breaking into a platform for purpose. The same voice that called Lazarus out of the grave can call you out of despair. The same hands that were pierced now hold your future. Hold on a little longer. Breathe through the pain. Let the tears fall if they need to. But don't walk away, because on the other side of this breaking is a version of you that is stronger, softer, wiser, and more aligned with heaven than ever before. And one day, when someone else is standing where you once stood, confused, shattered, questioning, you will look into their eyes and say, "I've been there." And your story will become their hope. Your breaking will become their bridge. Your scars will become proof that resurrection is real. Maybe that's the mystery. Maybe that's the hidden connection. The cross was never the end. The tomb was never the conclusion. And your breaking is not your burial. It is the soil where your calling is taking root. Stay, trust, surrender. Because what feels like the worst chapter of your life may be the very page where your true purpose begins.